Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village nestled between rolling green hills, there lived a kind-hearted girl named Sophie. She was 8 years old, with curious eyes and a gentle smile that could brighten anyone's day. Sophie lived with her grandmother in a cozy cottage at the edge of town, where wildflowers grew freely and old oak trees whispered stories in the wind. Sophie's most favorite thing in the whole world was helping others. Whether it was collecting berries for the baker, reading stories to little children, or simply listening when someone needed a friend, Sophie's heart was always ready. Her grandmother would often say, "Sophie, you have a gift for seeing when people need you most." One cool autumn evening, as the sun was painting the sky soft shades of orange and pink, Sophie was walking home from helping at the community garden. The air smelled like fresh earth and fallen leaves. She took her time, admiring how the light caught the trees, when she heard a sound that made her stop. It was a small, whimpering cry coming from beneath an old wooden bridge near the village edge. Sophie crouched down and peered into the shadowy space beneath the bridge. There, shaking and alone, was the tiniest puppy she had ever seen. The little creature had matted, muddy fur that might have once been golden, and one ear drooped sadly to the side. The puppy's large brown eyes looked up at Sophie with a mixture of fear and hope. "Hope, little one," Sophie whispered gently. "How did you get here all alone?" The puppy whimpered again, his tiny body trembling in the growing darkness. Without hesitation, Sophie carefully approached, moving slowly so she wouldn't startle him further. She reached out her hand, letting the puppy sniff her fingers. After a moment, his tail gave a feeble wag, and Sophie knew she had found a friend in need. Carefully, she scooped the puppy into her arms. He was much lighter than she expected, and Sophie could feel his bones beneath his matted coat. "Don't worry," she murmured, tucking him gently against her chest. "You're safe now. I promise I'll help you." Sophie made her way home, moving quickly but carefully to keep the puppy warm. When she arrived at the cottage, her grandmother was preparing dinner in the kitchen. She looked up, and her eyes immediately softened when she saw the bundle in Sophie's arms. "Oh, Sophie," her grandmother said, setting down her wooden spoon. "Where did you find this little one?" Sophie explained how she discovered the puppy beneath the bridge, and her grandmother listened with her whole heart. She was not the kind of woman to say no to someone in need. Together, they gently bathed the puppy in warm water, using Sophie's softest towel to dry his fur. They wrapped him in a clean blanket and gave him some warm milk mixed with a little broth. The puppy drank eagerly, and soon his eyes began to close. "He must have been so frightened and hungry," Sophie said softly, stroking his ears as he settled into sleep. Throughout the night, Sophie checked on the little puppy, making sure he was warm and comfortable. By morning, the puppy looked better already. His coat was beginning to shine, and his eyes were brighter. Sophie named him Sunny because his golden fur reminded her of summer sunshine, and because she hoped his bright spirit would return. But Sophie knew something important. This puppy belonged to someone. Someone was surely missing their beloved friend, just as Sunny must be missing his family. Sophie's kind heart understood that the right thing to do was to help Sunny find his way home. The next morning, Sophie and her grandmother created a colorful poster with a drawing of the puppy. They wrote a careful description below. "Found, small golden puppy with floppy left ear. Very friendly and gentle. If this is your puppy, please come find him at the village square." Sophie carefully placed posters around the village. She left them at the bakery, the market, the schoolhouse, and the community center. Then she waited patiently with Sunny, visiting the village square each day to see if anyone would recognize the little dog. Days passed slowly. Sophie cared for Sunny with all her love, and the puppy grew stronger each day. He began to play a little, his tail wagging more often. But Sophie remained hopeful that his real family would find them. Every time someone walked past, She watched their face carefully, wondering if they might be searching for their lost friend. One afternoon, as Sophie sat on the bench in the village square, with Sunny beside her, an elderly woman approached. She moved slowly, with a gentle smile on her weathered face. When she saw Sunny, she gasped softly. "Oh my," the woman said, sitting down beside Sophie. Is this little Biscuit?" Sophie's eyes filled with hope. "I found him beneath the old bridge," she explained. "I wasn't sure who he belonged to, so I've been taking care of him and posting notices." The elderly woman, whose name was Mrs. Eleanor, told Sophie her story. She had been traveling to care for her sick sister in the next town when Biscuit somehow escaped from her traveling bag at the train station. She had been so worried, searching everywhere, but the village was unfamiliar to her. When she returned home and saw Sophie's poster, her heart had leaped with joy. "Thank you," Mrs. Eleanor said, tears streaming down her gentle face. "Thank you so much for taking care of my dear Biscuit, and for not giving up hope." But here is where Sophie's story takes a tender turn. Mrs. Eleanor explained that she was very old and lived alone. Taking care of Biscuit had become difficult, and that was why she had been visiting her sister when the puppy escaped. She confessed that perhaps, in her heart, she had hoped someone kind would find him and give him a better home. Sophie felt a tug in her chest. She loved Sunny, or Biscuit, so very much already. But she understood what was truly right. She asked Mrs. Eleanor a question that surprised even herself. "Would you like to come visit Sunny whenever you wish? My grandmother and I would love to have you visit our home, and perhaps we could all care for him together, so he would never have to feel abandoned again." Mrs. Eleanor's tears turned to happy ones. She nodded, unable to speak at first. From that day forward, Mrs. Eleanor visited the cottage regularly. She told stories about Biscuit and about her own life. Sophie's grandmother prepared tea and biscuits, and the three of them, along with Biscuit, who had truly found his way home, became the very best of friends. The gift of second chances, the puppy thrived in his new life. He had not one family, but three people who loved him deeply. Sophie learned that being kind doesn't always mean keeping something for yourself. Sometimes, true kindness means sharing love and making sure everyone who needs a friend can find one. Mrs. Eleanor no longer felt lonely. She had a reason to leave her house each week, and she had friends who truly cared about her. The cottage, which had once been quiet, now filled with laughter, and the sound of a happy puppy's paws on the wooden floors. Sophie learned the most important lesson of all, that when we open our hearts to help others, we often discover that they help us in return. Biscuit had needed someone to rescue him, but he also brought joy and connection to all three of them. Every evening, as Sophie prepared for bed, she would think about that day beneath the bridge when she heard a frightened puppy's cry. She had made a choice to help, without knowing where it would lead. And that choice had changed everything for Biscuit, for Mrs. Eleanor, and for herself. A dream worth keeping. As the stars began to shine in the night sky above the village of Meadowbrook, Sophie would drift to sleep thinking of Biscuit's happy barks, Mrs. Eleanor's warm laugh, and her grandmother's knowing smile. She understood now that kindness is like a golden thread that connects hearts. When you pull on that thread, and her grandmother reading quietly by the fire, Sophie closed her eyes and dreamed of a world where no one was ever truly lost, because kind hearts like hers would always be there to help them find their way home.